Which
I was
one?
thinking of Alanis Morissette.
Yeah.
It's
Oh,
Joyce Morissette.
oh,
Hello,
very good.
Joyce.
Here is the lady Morissette.
Are you by any chance related to Alanis?
No, but you were my teacher at Meridian.
Oh,
Ah, yes, yes. I thought I remembered the name. Besides Alanis Morissette.
Mhm.
Oh, beautiful. Lovely. Thank you for joining. Well, I
I
wonder
think we
if we
can
should
slowly start.
we can
If
start
you are
and
fine.
yeah. We're going to
okay.
be recording this so that it can go onto YouTube. And we did go out a little bit late in the scheme of things and early in who needs to be here. And we'll have a beautiful conversation. So over to you, Ferial, to just introduce and lay the ground.
Awesome. Well, firstly, good evening, good afternoon, and good morning, wherever you are in the world, right? So, welcome to the Global Mayors Academy and to the talks we have here ever so often. It's been happening about every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks now. But yeah, today it's another great chat. Before we get into maybe introducing our guest speakers today, let me talk a little bit about some housekeeping. We're going to keep or we ask everybody to keep their mics off if you're not contributing at that time. If you want to contribute something, you can raise your virtual hand. And those of us who are managing the room will basically just ask you to unmute when you can contribute, and we ask for that contribution. For us, this is not about this kind of, we're not in a webinar right now. We're not in this whole, we've sketched out this whole plan of a speech that we're going to be giving you, but really engaging with a real conversation, because the topic we're talking about is really important that we engage as real human beings. And so I think depending on how many more people are going to come into the room, it really helps that we are not such a big group. So we can actually have a conversation among us. And so that said, when you want to contribute, just remember to raise your virtual hands. And then I'd like to start by introducing our guest speakers. So today we've gathered here to explore a profound and timely question. How do we move forward with greater wisdom in this moment, both in our own lives and in the systems we are helping to shape, whether that be a city, a business, a family, you name it, right? Today's conversation brings together these two wonderful ladies. I have the privilege of working with them very closely in many different projects. But they've dedicated much of their lives to understand human development, leadership, and the deeper patterns that shape our collective future. So, without any further ado, Dr. Marilyn Hamilton is the founder of Integral City and a pioneer in helping us see cities not simply as places, but as living human systems. And for more than 2 decades now, she has invited leaders, citizens, and communities to ask a different kind of question. Not who is in charge, but what intelligence is needed now. Her work reminds us that a city is a human hive. I love the stories she tells about that. A living field of relationships, learning how to become conscious of itself. And then we have the beautiful Dr. Paddy Pampallis, an educator, one of my own mentors, leadership development practitioner, and coach whose work has focused for so many years on helping individuals and organizations develop the awareness, maturity, and relational capacities needed to navigate complexity. Now, through her work with leaders, teams, cities, communities, she continually explores how personal transformation and systemic transformation are inseparable parts of the same journey. Now, together, these two beautiful ladies share a deep commitment to understanding how human beings can learn, grow, collaborate, and contribute more consciously to the flourishing of life. Now, welcome to the conversation today. which is the living city, integrating governance, economy, and meaning. It invites us into an exploration together. So with great gratitude and anticipation, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Marilyn Hamilton. Over to you, Marilyn.
Thank you so much, Ferial. And thank you, Paddy, for inviting me here. And so we could continue the conversation that we started last week or so at the Institute for Integral Studies in Europe. And I would like to share the slide set that I used at that time just as a provocation so that we could continue to have the conversation today. So if you'll just wait for a second, I'll set that up on screen. There we go. There we go.
It's good, Marilyn.
Is that good now?
Yes.
Great. So I'm flying a little blind because I can't see any of the other people in the room, but you can see my slides, and so you can always interrupt me and let me know if I need to stop. But I have a short presentation, and I'm calling this From Survival to Soul. It's an exploration of politics in the human hive of the park ecovillage Findhorn. So we heard Ferial talking a little bit earlier about where she lives. Well, I also live in Scotland, and I live in the oldest ecovillage in the UK. And I wanted to share this because I thought that this would be a much more alive way of looking at the journey from survival to soul, not as a theory, but as actually a lived experience. And so I wanted to share about the collective evolution in VUCA time. So a good question that I have to ask is what happens when an ecovillage famous around the world suddenly has to learn how to survive? When I arrived in Findhorn 8 years ago, after decades of working globally, I didn't know that what would happen very quickly is that this very famous place would be faced with a journey that was taking it from its original Findhorn Foundation through the creation of a first SCIO, that's a Scottish charitable institute organization. And now at this time, I find myself chairing a second SCIO with an emerging two-tier constitution, that's one with members. And the question has become, can the community survive profound change while remaining true to its soul? How profound was that change? Well, I've called it a VUCA storm. Probably most of you know that VUCA stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. So when I arrived, Brexit was in full swing, and in fact, it went through. Then we had COVID, then the financial pressures. And because of all of those buildup of tensions, we actually had 2 fires occur in the ecovillage. And the fires burned our sanctuary and our community center. And those were the 2 buildings that had the greatest heart, held the most of the relationships of all of the community. And so it was really a great, huge loss. And it then led to further transitions in our leadership. As I mentioned, there was an organizational collapse because the first Findhorn Foundation itself had to completely step back and realize that it could not continue in the way that it had before. As a result of that, it was a charity, and therefore it had accumulated a sizable number of assets in venues and accommodations and facilities. And so it was faced and is still in the process of transferring those assets to other charities that have arisen in the community. Through all of this, it's really meant a lot of fragmentation in the community. And the whole way of government has been challenged, and we've had to redesign. So the question has been not really, how do we create a better future? But it has been, can our communities survive at all? So those of us who are interested in looking at things through integral lenses can ask ourselves, well, why does integral matter? Well, when we look at traditional politics, we tend to focus on structures and policies and resources. But as Paddy could well tell you, the integral perspective invites us to include our interiors, our cultures, our systems, our evolution. And without these additional lenses, I don't think I could have made sense of what is happening. On the right-hand side of your screen, you'll see that there are 5 maps that I use in Integral City. I'm not going to go into all of those details, but each one of them provides a different map of the city that is really based in an integral whole system view. And this is what has helped me to be able to have a perspective on the different changes that are bringing tensions into the community, and also to stand back and be able to have some sense of what would make the most sense about where we might proceed from here. How can we both understand and navigate complexity? I've discovered while working here that there aren't just the 4 voices that many of you are familiar with in the work that I do, but there's also 4 ways of looking at stewardship, and I call it stewardship intelligence. So I began to realize that these were a form of intelligence that were coming forward and helping us survive our challenges, and that they were in fact capacities that have emerged from the community because of the challenge and change. It's interesting, you know, when you look at learning and change in the integral perspective, it is actually the challenges that provoke the change. So out of those changes have come what I'm calling 4 stewards: carers, curators, choreographers, and change makers. Let's have a look and see what each one of them contributes to the stewardship of the human hive. First of all, we have the carers, and I say that what they do is hold the hive together. They ask questions like, who maintains trust? Who tends to the relationships? Who prevents fragmentation? Examples can include actually community listening, conflict mediation. I was in one of those on Sunday even. Elder care and maintaining morale. And the political lesson here is that survival begins with social coherence. Survival begins with social coherence. So let's look at the curators. Curators, not surprisingly, preserve, even find meaning. And the questions they ask are, what is worth carrying forward? So really appreciating the ancestors, things that we have in our history even, but what is worth carrying forward? What is essential? And what can be released? So these stewards are focusing on the educational impulse, the subtle assets, the values, the stories, and the practices. And the political lessons they bring are that regeneration requires memory. Regeneration requires memory. Our choreographers in the stewardship intelligence reweave the system. So they're weavers that bring together questions that can go through the warp and the woof of the fabric of community. And they ask, how do we share these assets anyway? How do we collaborate, not just individually, but with our organization? How do we make decisions together? And how do we enable mutual trust and respect? Some examples of how we've been weaving these together in our community are what I call the Asset Transfer Organization collaboration, which actually renamed itself FAT, Findhorn Foundation Asset Transfer Group. We love acronyms here, so apologies if they get to be too many. We also have a collaboration circle where all the organizations come together on a monthly basis and update each other about the various challenges that they're facing, or in fact, maybe their business plans and their marketing. We also have an ecosystem conversation because we recognize that our organizations aren't just a group of enterprises that are sitting in a line, but in fact, they're interconnected in many different ways and have become an ecosystem. We've had to look at governance redesign, as I mentioned at the beginning, and whole new partnerships. So organizations that have never partnered before in any formal way are now finding ways to do that and reasons to do that. And our political lesson from the choreographers is the future emerges through relationships, not control. The future emerges through relationships, not control. Now let's come to our fourth stewards, and they're change makers. They create new possibilities. They're the ones that ask, should we move from a one-tier to a two-tier constitution? Should we move from one that is just trustees-led, or should we move to a two-tier one and open up the possibility that we are responsible to the members of the community? How do we update works and programs that have become signature programs, ones that we call Experience Week, from I to we? What is the theme of our website? And how do we partner with individual, independent educators? Some of the examples that have emerged from these change makers is this new SKIO that we are starting on. And we've discovered that in this SKIO, if we say Findhorn Foundation SKIO, each one of those words has a possibility of triggering someone. So what we have started to do is to use a little nickname. And since this is the third version of the Findhorn Foundation, we called it FF3 for short. So now that we've got the change makers in our circle, what's their political lesson? It's that evolution requires experimentation. And we have to be willing to realize that experiments don't always succeed. So this requires that we learn things like, instead of trying to have one entry point for our many online systems, maybe we should have a theme that is something like many doors, one garden. And this has helped us be able to see that using the lessons from nature and the metaphors that come naturally to us in this beautiful part of the world are ways that we can experiment and actually learn deeply what nature has to teach us. As Paddy mentioned, I discovered that in this process, the politics that I was thinking would be here was not where what I was expecting. It turns out that my deepest discovery is that politics here is not about power, but rather I found more often that it's about belonging. It's even about grief, the grief of loss, and also identity, trusting one another, finding new meanings, and this whole new exploration of stewardship. These have become sort of central political realities in the life of the community. I would even come back to our integral maps and say, integral politics has become for me what I would call soul stewardship. And so you see AQUAL, that stands for all quadrants, all lines, all levels, all types. And as Fariel mentioned, I've come long ago to call the city the human hive, because that is much more a reminder to us that it's a dynamic living system. It's not just about bricks and mortar and wires and the analog or the versions of our communication systems and transportation systems. Soul stewardship inevitably involves the VUCA, the volatile, the uncertain, the complex, and the ambiguous. And as I have realized, it also embraces the soul. The soul has become part of our inquiry, and it asks, how do we preserve the soul while redesigning our structures? How do we preserve our soul while redesigning our structures? I say that integral politics isn't merely the management of competing interests. When we embrace cultivating the conditions that allow communities to evolve and bring in the carers with the curators, with the choreographers, with the change makers, we realize that together they create the possibility for collective resilience. And we're seeing that this too is another ecosystem, an ecology of intelligences, if you will. And we see that the politics isn't any longer who is in charge, but perhaps we should consider which intelligence is needed now and recognize that these intelligences breathe in and out, and at different moments, different intelligences are needed to lead. There isn't only one way. And community resilience depends perhaps less on hierarchy and much more on activating the appropriate intelligence for the moment. When I look back over my 8 years here at Findhorn Ecovillage, I see the 3 organizational changes. I could say that the first Findhorn Foundation was the legacy institution, and it was alive for about close to 60 years before it went through the second stage, which is a transitional structure, the first Findhorn Foundation scale. And our beloved FF3 is now a emerging regenerative governance structure. We see that through the observations over the 8 years, this has become a kind of I would say, a longitudinal case study. And it actually reveals how ideals and institutions, governance, asset, and soul evolve through time. Getting close to being able to say in this little sharing with you that politics, coherence, and the human hive are so much woven together. I think that I've come to see that politics is a search for coherence. And since I've been thinking about the city's intelligences for quite a long time, I asked myself, what intelligences actually enable coherence to emerge? And if we had more time, we could go into the whole 12 intelligences that are shown on the GPS framework that is displayed on the screen. But I realized that the coherence arises not just from structures alone, but from these multiple intelligences interacting across people, organizations, communities, and ecosystems. And Paddy was looking for some questions. Well, luckily, she knows I very rarely turn up anywhere without good questions. And the questions I'm going to share with the group and that we can maybe explore is, what capacities help communities survive the VUCA conditions? I even asked last week, when you think about your own life, what are the capacities in your life that help you survive VUCA conditions? The second question, how do we preserve soul while redesigning structures? And the third, what would politics look like if we understood ourselves as a human hive? And lastly, beneath the human hive, a final reflection. Politics as power asks, who decides? But politics as collective intelligence asks, which intelligence is needed now? Politics as attunement asks, what is life asking of us now? Attunement that brings in resonance. And for a long time, Findhorn's long practice of deep listening and co-creation with the intelligences of nature has invited us to consider this third question of attunement along with the first two. So those are the thoughts I want to share with you tonight, and I'm looking forward to having another conversation with Paddy. For those of you who want to go deeper with my work, there's the 3 books in the Integral City series. There's even a translation into Russian. And there's also a couple of books and many others that I have contributed to in the Paul Van Schaik Integral Mentor series of the Accelerating City Change in a VUCA World, which was also very appropriate to the background to thinking tonight. So thank you very much, and I look forward to the conversation that we're about to have.
Thank you so much, Marilyn. I enjoyed that very much. As we move forward with our work in the Global Mayors Academy, it was exciting. Now, I mean, you guys heard that I live in Scotland, so I don't live very far from Marilyn. And on occasion, I've been up at Findhorn, and I know a lot of the stories. And over the years, you know, hearing things coming from there. So seeing Marilyn move and into that position of, you know, stewarding that process is very beautiful. And hopefully, Marilyn, that becomes one of our living labs that we can, again, talk about again and again and again, and so many lessons we can take from there. Again, it's a small enough situation, you know, place, space, where a small enough community where you can see the change very fast. and you can, yeah, you can take a lot of great lessons from. So I'm looking forward to that. A lot of the work Marilyn speaks about will be included in our City Leaders program that we have developed in the Global Mayors Academy. So with that speaking, so that's why you see the little labels behind us, Global Mayors Academy, because we're kind of talking about that today as well. So Paddy, I want to invite you next to weigh in on the conversation. And then once Paddy has talked to us a little bit and shared a little bit of her wisdom, then we're going to open up into a conversation with all of you here in the room. Thank you, Paddy.
I'm just sitting with the enjoyment of listening to it again through a different lens than I did last time. Marilyn and I were in a presentation or a gathering last week, and what is so interesting that the group that is available, and I mean, we haven't even started sharing with each other about each other and who we are in the room. It still provokes, I'm feeling a very different energy from the one that was there last week. And what is that? If we look at the hive, you know, what is the energy? What are we picking up? What is present in this moment with this group at this time that might change the conversation and might create a different politics, whether it's politics of intelligences, or politics of power, or politics of whatever it needs to be. And Emmanuel, it's love to see you here, and lovely to see you here with the awareness of what we have spoken about of collective intelligence and how it is perceived in the African continent and what that means for us. So I don't know. I think let's take any first thoughts that might have landed with you, just questions that you have in your mind before I continue.
Do we have anybody? Paddy, I have a thought that, because I was taking notes as Marilyn was talking, because, you know, there was some little diamonds in there that was kind of, you know, hitting home for me. Challenges. The word challenges, she said, actually causes us to rethink things, right? Challenges provoke the change. And how many of us really, I mean, I was having a conversation earlier with our colleague, Andy Ferguson, and our whole conversation was about this. We said that over the years, he and I had worked together, you know, very often when we're having our biggest challenges, we want to throw our toys at the cart, right? Because it's hard, that stuff. But when we reflected back over our decade of work together, we said that was the moments we have learned the most. We have, those challenges pressed us, because many of you will know this, but we started Living Cities Earth. We started things like with Marilyn, with, you know, Paddy and Daryl and others here, Anton and so on. And we started Global Mayors Academy, and we didn't have any money to do this with. Now, that's a huge challenge. I remember Marilyn always saying to us, hey guys, we need to find the money, because, you know, usually in traditional business, you go and you find your investment and now you're starting your thing. But here we are, 130 practitioners later, joined in this with passion, earning nothing, right? Just because they bring those expertise with such incredible, I don't know, graciousness to the world. And then we create this Global Mayors Academy, and here's Paddy and Marilyn and others working inside of this, again, just for love of the world. And for me, those challenges, what I realized today as I spoke with with Andy, was it is those very things. If we had the money, there are things that we've innovated we would not have innovated because it was too easy. The things that we've now actually innovated, Paddy, I mean, we've had to think, we've had to sit and say, how do we do that without money? And it became incredible, the results. We are developing AI models. We are developing all kinds of things that are off the charts. But from the depth of our souls, because there was nothing else to draw from. We could only use the resource within ourselves. So all I'm trying to say here is, yes, Marilyn, that statement that you made, so powerful, because I think maybe we should not be running away from that, right? Maybe it's about embracing those challenges and saying, hey, I was made for this moment. And clearly, whatever that challenge is about to present to me, I have got it in me to respond to. Now let me find what that is, right? And together, let's find what that is, because often the other part of what I heard you say was the wisdom is in us, not necessarily just in me, but in us. Thank you. That's my reflection. And we have Daryl Gooden. Please, Daryl, share your reflection.
Yeah, I was struggling to get in, so I came in late, but I caught the last 6 or 7 slides of Marilyn's presentation. So apologize up front for that. But I am curious, and to your point, Burial, yeah, I believe, we are preparing for something, and in anticipation, we may not exactly know what really we're preparing for, but I think everyone has an intuition that we're preparing for something that's going to be, in the words of Claire W. Graves, momentous, right? And in that place of preparing intuitively, let's say, I've always kind of held on to Integral City as a mechanism or means by which the transformation can take place. Now, and I'll admit, I read Marilyn's first book. I'm aware of the other ones, but I'm not as aware of them as I delved into and even used the first Integral City book in some of my own lectures and things that I do. But I'd like to know from Marilyn, what was the impetus for the second and third book? I mean, what was it in addition to the completeness of what I thought, this is a roadmap, the first book? And so I'm curious because I'll admit I haven't read the other two. I read the first one. I'm like, okay, I got all I need here. So I'd like to hear because I'm thinking I need to go ahead and open myself up to digesting and internalizing what those books are contributing. I'll say this last thing, and then Marilyn, maybe you could respond to it. The thing I think we're intuitively preparing for has a lot to do with Saeed's book, who predicts. I tease him that he predicts 6 out of the 8 global indicators he points out are signaling collapse. So if it's not collapse, and if we don't go all the way to an autocratic way of ruling everything because everything is so VUCA oriented that we need to go to strong men and women to just make stuff happen for us. So if these two avenues are happening, Daniela, I can't remember her last name, but she has something she calls the third attractor, which is to suggest there is a movement that needs to happen to prevent the collapse in one instance or the overall dependence on strong men and women in another case, but let's have a collective intelligence applied. And I'm of the opinion it's the reason I'm so bought into LCE is because I just believe in my knower of knowing it's the only way, so to speak. And so, but I'm curious, what's the impetus for the other 2 books? Marilyn? What was it that you didn't, what was it you felt you needed to expand upon after the first book?
Thanks, Daryl. Well, my first book, I'm very happy. I'm very happy with my first book. But for me, when I started out to look for the science of the city, I couldn't find it. So my first book was first published in 2008. So the research I did prior to that, I was looking for how could we describe a city in a whole perspective, like integral, that was living, that was evolving, and that was in service to Gaia. So that took a lot of research to find the 12 and decide to frame it as like multiple intelligences. I thought that individuals had multiple intelligences. And I had realized in my research, in my whole life work, that all the different scales of human systems were fractal, and they were all going through the same learning process. So I figured that a city would be fractal as well, out of the same, so that as humans are, cities are the human system writ large at a collective level, but it would be fractal and it would have multiple intelligences. So by the time I finished it, I would say to many people that it took me years to understand what was written through me, if you understand what I mean. But I'm a very practical person. And although I loved the models and I thought that the whole argument made sense, I wanted to know, did it work? And I lived in a small city in Canada at that time, Abbotsford. And so I was actually very privileged that I was in a position to try it all out. So I would do the work that the various framings and suggestions out of the first book, the science, and see, does it really work? If you have a challenge, does if the City Hall and the Chamber of Commerce don't agree, how do you get through that kind of a relationship? So the second book is all about really the field work. So if you look at that, you'll find that it's framed around how you ask good questions. So one of the intelligences is an inquiry intelligence, and most of us don't know how to ask such good questions. So the whole book is action research based. And I was trying to find the evidence for what I had written about in the first book. So if you follow that, there you go. You will find that every chapter in the second book is an action research design. It doesn't tell you that you're going to find these exact results wherever you are, but if you take this design and apply it to where you are, you will discover relevant information for answering the questions that each one of the chapters focuses on. So when I finished that book, by that time, the VUCA world had come up with the phrase VUCA, because there was a time when we didn't have the phrase VUCA. And I thought that was a very good way of describing the world as a whole, and that there were many challenges that I would consider such challenging questions that they needed a sort of a thought leader to speculate on what would happen if I, say, looked at biosecurity. And that was long before COVID. So I actually have a chapter in that book on biosecurity for the city. I learned about that from avian flu. So I learned about it from the agricultural sector and applied it to the city. So that book, I would say, is broken into caring, contexting, and the framings of looking at how we manage to pull those together to really address the whole of the city. Yeah, so that's why I wrote the two books, and I continue to write. I just finished since talking with Paddy. I just told her I finished writing 7 blogs and the newsletter that will be published this weekend. So there's a whole lot more inspiration that's come out of this discussion.
Well, thank you. Thank you. That makes a lot of sense. I'm going to have to go ahead and get those other 2 books.
Absolutely.
You go for it.
To know this, Daryl.
You can actually find the second book. The first book and the second book are both on my website as talking books. So you can listen to them while you drive to work.
Well, yeah, that's my favorite way. Yeah.
And Marilyn, what's really exciting, is that you talked about being a methodologist, thinking about all these things, spending years doing that, but then you went and did the practical. You implemented it in the city, and I think even now, as you move into Findhorn, and you're really implementing those things, you're discovering all new things again that you missed, initially, because initially you weren't leading that whole process. You were working with a government. Now you are the government.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? And this is all different roles, right? So it's so beautiful, because one of the big things, I'm not expecting an answer in this moment, but one of the big things, as you shared, that came the whole time for me was, if you didn't have a leader that was conscious about the things you just spoke about, then so many of the things that you would have then worked out with the community would not have been worked out with the community. So there's something about leadership, having certain intelligences, having a certain kind of maturity that allows a community to then, take on this process and evolve. So we'll talk about that later. But Paddy, please, to you.
I just wanted to know whether Stephen or Joyce, Manu, I see, hi Mataba, I see you're on, wanted to say something at this point.
I'm
Stephen.
here because
No,
Oh,
hi.
oh.
Hi, everyone. Nothing as yet. Thank you.
Hello, Mataba. Sorry,
Stephen,
Joyce. Stephen, Joyce, Stephen.
Yeah,
You're
I think
on.
it's really interesting. I'm coming at this from a much more kind of pragmatic and practical basis, and I don't have the background, haven't done the research before this. I'm really interested to look at the kind of scale at which this is going to be applied, and how homogeneous your communities must be to get this to work. I think looking at from the South African perspective, it's really interesting. We're seeing people talking about things like balkanization and breakups of control and breakdowns of systems into smaller units. And I'm really interested with the eco-village. And maybe it's a little less academic. My question is, what kind of size do you find that this system works at, where you can get the kind of alignment that you need to implement it?
That's a great question, Stephen. And in fact, when I wrote it, I wasn't in the eco-village. I was in a city. And so I'd been starting long before I came here and then experimented. So the size of the city was about 150,000, a small city, which again is what LCE is looking at. But I also have been to most of the large cities of the world. And when I hit Delhi, I paused a long time and said, how does this apply? But then my previous stop had been to Oroville, and there Aurobindo, if you know of Aurobindo as the philosopher, he actually did have some perspectives about cities. And he believed that the proper size, the optimal size of a city was about 50,000, which was 50,000 people, which I also thought was very interesting because that's about the number of bees in a beehive. And he did actually recommend in the 1920s that India not go into mega cities, but that they should have many smaller cities. And he believed it because he looked at it also as a living system. So I do think that there is actually research now that shows from things like climate responses and energy use that there is sizes of cities that are optimal. And I think it turns out it is around 100,000 or so, 100, 150,000. So I think that we're probably going to be faced in our years ahead with resizing cities. The question I hold, what is, and in the meantime, most cities have neighborhoods, and the neighborhoods you can work with and use these same patterns and principles, and you can find them to the extent that they're independent neighborhoods. So that I do think the integral model works well, and you have to be able to see how the collectives are representing as much of a wholeness as possible. So I've done lots of experiments with suburbs, and coming to the eco-village was an interesting challenge. And although it's in Scotland, it is not at all a homogeneous culture. It's actually an international culture. And that's what makes it so challenging, because everybody brings their expectations of how you make decisions from where they came from the culture they came from. And even so, I know that most large cities have exactly that same challenge. The city of Toronto, Ontario in Canada has something like 250,000 languages that are spoken there. And I use language often as a proxy for community. So yes.
250,000?
No, I said 200, and did I say 1,000? I meant 250 languages. 250 different languages. Yeah, not 250,000 languages. I don't think we have quite that many. We have a lot, not quite that many.
Beautiful. And Joyce, thank you for that question, Stephen. It's, I mean, those of us from here are always trying to go, well, how do we work in the organizations or the cities that we work in, and how do we help in the South African system, which is, I mean, there's a lot of politics around that. So
I don't know if you know, Paddy, but actually some time ago, I was asked to work in one of the large parts of Joburg, Caroline.
yes,
So I have applied the same patterns
we will
work there.
We will get you back in here.
Marilyn,
Joyce. Sorry,
Yes,
Joyce had
Marilyn,
wanted to say.
just about the
Oh,
same thing that Stephen was talking about. Marilyn also, Stephen, I know from the work that Marilyn does, they also didn't, it's not all Marilyn that was doing that, right? We have other practitioners that, for example, organize how governance can work within the community, things like that. So she's brought in others of our practitioners, someone like Nate Whitestone and others. And so they really help you to break that down as to how do I do that on that kind of what Marilyn shared about the neighborhood level. How do we start to work? Now, in South Africa, it might be municipalities that you work with as opposed to the city itself, because we kind of have big cities in South Africa. So just saying there's ways to do that and practitioners that can help with that.
Joyce?
thank you. I'm here because I stumbled on the website and was so taken by the vision and principles. So I'm really excited about the work you're doing, all of you together. And Marilyn, when you were speaking, I liked your practical questions. When you ask, can our community survive at all? Because I presented at the Presencing Institute's Regenerative Future Labs this morning, and it was wonderful. But there was, was some discussion about framing, moving from despair, which I understand, but I really am drawn to being practical and grounded and reality based. And it's interesting that neighborhood has come into the conversation because when you were giving your presentation, I was thinking about the neighboring that happened here in the US in Minnesota. And my background's in nursing. And there's been you know, protest singing movement, for example, that's peaceful and nonviolent, that's been increasing. And there's historical precedents for that. But I feel like we are the medicine. And this was just something that organically happened with all the intelligences. So, thank you for what you shared.
Thank you, Joyce. I have a great faith in singing. I mean, that is where you're literally resonant, right? And I myself sing. I don't know if you know Teze, the sacred songs. I sing Teze every morning. That's a practice that we have here. And I think community choirs and everywhere are wonderful, wonderful nurturers of community and cities. So thank you for doing that.
Well, I'm going to step in with that for the role of singing in our South African or African culture, and please others come in with that because singing is part of everything. Whether there's a funeral, whether there's a celebration or a birth or a protest, it doesn't matter what happens, the voice that is articulated into some rhythm and the deep rhythm, then there's some very unusual rhythms in the South African structure of the way things are sung. And for those of you who might be jazz lovers would have known Abdullah Ibrahim, who's just passed away, and such a beautiful jazz exponent of kind of the merging of the different cultures and the different intelligences, but into the music of what jazz does and that composition of becoming something. And I'm listening to the beehives, and I'm kind of, when you listen under a tree and you hear that singing, there is a awakening of something that comes up. But definitely I have such an image as a child of living in a mining town and on the Saturday evening, hearing the singing from the compounds, the mining compounds coming through into my bedroom as I was trying to sleep, but kind of this beautiful, haunting beat that has the heartbeat of life. I think we want to bring this into the fusion of what we're doing right throughout the world into the Global Mayors Academy, and the group of us from Living Cities Earth, and which inspired me to join Living Cities Earth and then the GMA, is the inspiring people, of which you must be some if you're sitting in this uh, this room this evening. You are here with that willingness to say, how do we become good neighbors? How do we human well together? How do we do this? We've got these wonderful skills, these wonderful architectures, these wonderful plans of how to put in a skywalk or a metro rail or something about, and it cannot be done on its own. It has to be done in the spirit of neighborliness. Jerome, and then I'm going to go into what we're doing a little bit. Hello. Please
Hi,
unmute.
greetings, and thank you so much for bringing the element of song. And somebody just sent me a song just now. I was in a long meeting and sent me a song about the during the heart of the apartheid system in South Africa, where people were forcibly removed from one place to the next. The song details the parts, everything that happened from being forcibly removed and carrying the pass, the whole drama of the pass laws. But the way the song was created is very upbeat and does not have the somberness of the moment, but is told like a very hyped song that you want to dance to and sing along to. So I was thinking of the magic of song, that it can take something that is supposed to drag you down and lift you completely up and still hear the message, but from a place that is removed from that. I'm also reminded of a Jewish friend of mine who moved from Joburg to Cape Town, and we worked together in the mines. Um, and teaching safety in the mines using storytelling and song. And it was a beautiful way of communicating the value of safety, where people could use their bodies to dance and sing and get the message across that this is important. I need to, make sure that I protect myself, I protect my brother, in, under the earth, using song and storytelling. So thank you so much for that.
Oh, you'll have to share it in the chat, Jerome. So let me bring you into our work of what we're doing and see what links we can make from this. The process of why we have become this community, and we really are inviting people to come in. We're not here to change what you're already doing, but to find ways in which we can all weave together, and ways that we can use. You've heard Marilyn speak of the integral map, and I'm a great proponent of it. It is a map that offers a common kind of experience, where each of the particulars and the signature presence and the diversity can sit in without excluding them in any way. But it gives us a map, it gives us that GPS, it gives us a way that goes back to our roots. And in the work that I've done for years in working with across governments and cities, municipalities and organizations, health, such a beautiful privilege of working across so many sectors and so many areas, from Fortune 500 to base grassroots areas where people are actually developing from the song and from the soul. The song, the soil, the soul. I think those three are going to have to go together. So what is the quality of the city? And in the working of the quality of the city really is about the quality of the thinking, or the quality of the interior work that we all have to do, but not on our own. It's absolutely in the collective field. It absolutely is around a human operating system for thriving cities. And we've drawn a lot on Marilyn's work and other people's work around maturing. How does leadership mature? How does a city mature? How does a hive or a neighbor mature? What are the conditions that provoke these? And what are the conditions that we can actually work with? And there's so many examples from our own African situation, which have, we know, been let go of or been taken over by. And that kind of reclaiming, Marilyn, you talked about remembering, and the remembering is such an important thing. There's another great person, Jean Houston, who's also passed recently, and she's been involved with Meridian University as well. But I remember her when we were starting out early 2000s as an organization, and we had a movie evening of What the Bleep. And the paradigm shift, for those of you who might remember it or have some thought of it, was so incredible to entertain the idea of this narration of another kind of world, of the essence of something back rooted into the system, rooted into the soil and our soul connection. So we have, I mean, there are many reasons that we're all engaged in the place that I live. I live in one of the most beautiful places. Yeah, I'm sure there are many in the world, and there are, but for Cape Town, with trees around me, a mountain, streams, water, the the vividness of the expanse of nature and the beauty is so breathtaking sometimes. And then a street that I'm also on that is becoming busier and busier and busier. And the frenetic paradox of that and the forest that we live with. You know, how do we work with this in a way that can be fruitful and safe for our people and safe for our children? So the choice really is, how do we make choice? And as we know in the kind of, and I am speaking from a slightly Western hierarchical move of development through time, but I'm also very aware of the indigenous cyclical nature of things which continue moving around and around, and that as a living system, this person and place and planet and purpose that we are here. Where do we want to live? Where do we want to thrive? How can we come together? So the City Leaders Program is really about getting expert people who have conscious willingness and experience of working with individuals and cities and regenerative practice and AI and all the technical conditions, the energy systems, health, justice. How do we get people who are looking at it in a way that can bring us together? So from a community to a movement, and a movement is not just something that we want to talk about. We want people to come in and offer what it is that they are doing, but we're offering a place in which we can make those links. We can join the web. We can actually say, like Indra's net, we are the jewels in this web, the sky of this galaxy, where we can see each one shining through its deepening. And we need to go into people have wonderful experience in programs. And because of them being short or them being tick box experience in organization or in the cities or in the government, let's get it done. We tick box. Yes, people have got the cognition of something. And again, as Marilyn has said, it's more than cognition. There's an embodiment. There is the use of multiple intelligences that need to be reprogrammed in ways that can actually bring this forward, that can actually say, hold on, this is an ongoing cyclical work. This doesn't stop. This doesn't rest in a moment. It rests in continually building on each other. And that has to take out some kind of ego fixation, where my way is the best way, where we see the world coming in at us without us being able to choose our response to it. And it's only after we have matured in some way and got some experience in life, or fortunately for some younger people who have really been able to work or plug into this, seeing that actually this is not the way to go. We need another way. So if we can remember where we come from, our essence, our essential self, and build those capabilities from being very self-focused, self-centric, into the later stages of maturity, where that transformational capability is an intentional movement, where we can see more, act more, include more, and not polarize ourselves. And we see it as a dynamic and continually questioning capability, where systems adaptability and capability and responsiveness is ongoing. If we're in this early stage of my way is the right way, I need to survive, I am important, or my own small group is important, we simply cannot work with the cosmic and the environmental stresses and the collective place. And of course, going to the moon or doing any sort of space travel really helps us kind of recognize that we're all on this globe together. This is our hive, again, to use Marilyn's words. And when we're looking at, I've moved the quadrants, the Wilber's quadrants around for those of you who might be working with that formulation of it, to say that in the spirit of Ubuntu, I am because we are. It's the being and becoming of something. And the being becoming is not only of the individual, the being and becoming is of the collective vision. It is of the system, the marketplace. It is of the behaviors and the actions and the jobs we create. That is an interplay within the system, within any kind of organizational system. So we are inviting you to become co-founders, to join the founding cohort. We're going to start on the 25th of July, and the program specific program will start in September, but we will have a gathering on the 25th of July. But the process that I want to come back to right here and now, besides, please get involved, bring your skills, share what you're doing. Let's see if we can collaborate and bring more of us together in order to do this. How do we start enhancing these kind of conversations from the experience of people in communities who have actually done this? And how do we learn from each other? How do we actually learn from each other and put ourselves aside into the collective whole? So how do we support it? And this is a version also from Urban Hub, which is the Integral Africa approach. And Emmanuel, who is here, was one of the authors in this, and I edited the process. So if you're interested in that, Paul's work is really fabulous, and it will be featured on our website. So I'm going to stop there and say, how has that contributed, added, limited, shut down, opened up? Any kind of questions?
So please, if you have any questions,
yeah. I just would like to respond. The two Integral African conferences I attended, Paddy, of course, you were one of the principal organizers of that. I was really struck in both experiences by that African wisdom track that was there, and took and embraced myself the Ubuntu concept, which I think has a lot to teach the whole world about how, and I love how you took the quadrants and made them different. you can take these models that everybody embraces, but your reorientation of it makes a lot of sense to me. And so that I am, because we are Ubuntu principle, when you reoriented that, made, it just makes it pop, so to speak, and brings, like what Marilyn was pointing out, it takes an abstraction almost and makes it more practical, where you could go, I see what this is now, and I think I can do that. And so I think, there is a lot to gain from what the work we're all engaged. And my way of explaining it, I have two ways of looking at it. In one instance, like what Ferry was saying, well, whether people are getting paid or not or whatever, people do this work because they believe in it, and that's a great and wonderful thing. But when people are getting ready to commit their time, talent, and treasure into something, then the compelling case for change, is either being made, has been made, or at least recognized that, okay, there's a lot here that I need to be able to engage with, and it resonates with me. Like, to me, from the get-go, when I came upon integral cities, I went, aha, this is it. And developed a couple of presentations arguing for the very same thing, that it is in cities that we can make a difference in society. And that's, I guess, the work LTE is very much committed to over the long haul. I don't believe we have to think or worry about anything about financial monies and anything like that. I think the power of the ideas, the concept, and the people involved are sufficient at this point to reorient how people place value on things. Far too long, I think we've placed value on things in simply financial terms. But the holistic approach, it engages, as was said earlier by somebody, everything, not just the cognitive, but the embodiment of the thing. And I think all the things we've touched upon today so much resonates with me. I don't have to really think about it, because the minute someone said it, I intuitively internalize it. Went, yes, of course, songs, of course. And I'll say this last thing: during the pandemic, one of the most striking experiences I had, because I was still trying to work and do things virtually all of a sudden, and I did a few of those, but I was so impressed by several things I came across where there were these hundreds of people singing, just singing. And there were 3, 4, or 5 different kinds of things like that, where in spite of the pandemic, oh no, by the way, the planet like cleaned up completely for like 2, 3 days because nobody was driving, things like that, So all these things are instructional, but unless someone take those experiences that were very instructional in some ways, and promote, embellish, whatever the word is, to make sure that folks go, oh wow, yeah, that did happen. And that singing that went on when so many people were put on Zoom. I think in some instances it was over 100, maybe even 1,000. It was like when they sung, I just listened, and it felt good. I mean, I'm from New Orleans in the United States, and we're all about music. And so I completely realize and agree with that statement about singing. So appreciate everyone's thoughts. Really good, inspirational and thoughtful things. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Daryl. And with that said, I'll just pass it to Marilyn, because she's got her hand up. Please, Marilyn.
Thanks, Marilyn, and thanks, Daryl. I also was going to comment about Paddy shifting just turning the integral model on its side so that the roots of the tree were the inner and the branches that we could see are the outer. So it's a beautiful metaphor. I think it's also really powerful, and does a very nice, elegant job of showing the integral model can look very flat and even mechanistic. And I think that you also work with Suzanne Cook-Reuter, and I've followed Suzanne's work we both started into integral at about the same time. And I know that in more recent years, she's challenged the sort of flat integral model without the dynamics of really bringing it into living systems. But I think it can easily shift into there. if the person who's using it can allow it, as you have done, to demonstrate that it is coming out of life. It isn't an imposed model. That's why I wrote the second book as well, Daryl, is to find the roots of this and see how it moves through real life and real challenges. The other thing I was going to remark on is I love this exploration of the song, and Paddy, you had really noticed so elegantly that once the idea of singing was brought up, that it connected back to the attunement that had sort of resonated for us last week. And I think that, you know, one of the things that's really valuable about living in ecovillage Findhorn is that there's 3 practices or 3 principles, depending on which way you are looking at them. And one of them is deep inner listening. So listening to that connection with others and life, not just human life, that work is love in action, and that we co-create with nature, with the intelligences of nature. So exploring intelligences has really been for me not just a human endeavor, but also non-human. And I think that you're thinking of, I love that's a book, Song, Soul, and Soil.
Oh, yes.
Let's
Yes.
co-write it. Have you written it already?
That will the book, you know, on her tomb, there will be a sign on the tombstone saying she who will have written. I've got so many parts of it, and it has to be written, because part of the reorientation is part of the uterus part of bringing the feminine into the movement of it. There's a whole concept behind it. And Namuli, I want to bring you in while you are have your hand up as well. Lovely
Actually,
to see
Alice.
you.
Yeah.
Alice.
Is it Alice?
Thank you. I just wanted to ask the chair, Cheryl, can I kindly share without the video, because I'm in a space where I'm not able to. Is that okay?
Please do, Alice. Please go for it.
Okay, good. Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to comment on first Dr. Paddy's and then talk to Dr. Hamilton. First, you mentioned about the whole, how in Africa we connect a lot with music. I wanted to add dance. Why do I say dance? Because I'm currently living in Canada, and one of the things that people here actually the question, I mean, puzzle them is, how do you explain people living in poverty? Because clearly, when you talk about like an average, you know, country or African, like the levels of poverty there, how do you explain the kind of excitement and joy and happiness in the human beings there? It's unexplainable. Do you understand? Because if you find someone that poor here, like in a Western world, they'll be miserable. They would literally kick you, because they just don't even understand why you're happy. Why do you have to dance? Why do you have to twist? Anyway, so I've been on a journey to really understand, why is it that Africans, and if you just go online, and then anywhere, any city or in Africa, I come from East Africa, definitely. So you'll find kids, it could be poor kids, or of course you won't find kids in very rich suburbs dancing on the streets, but they are just dancing with no clothes, torn clothes, dirty, and they are genuinely happy.
Yeah.
So, which in a Western world, those kids, if they find themselves that poor, they would literally want to beat you up. Like, how can you even be happy anyway? So one of the things that happened to me is I happened to travel during a heavy winter in Canada, and I traveled back to Africa. And suddenly, I just could not believe, when I woke up in the morning, I could not imagine. First of all, as I live in the countryside, on a farm, I woke up, I was woken by like at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning by a cock. I was like, oh my God, how is that even possible that this is like you hear this sound? Then like before 5 o'clock or something, there were birds were like chirping away, but at such high pitched noises, like I just could not believe it. Then by 6 o'clock, before most humans get up, there's so much noise out there and everything is vibrating. You get out, the sun is so bright, which was a big contrast when you come from, of course, a heavily winter. Everything is so quiet. You don't hear anything, and of course there's snow on the ground. And we're now going back to Africa. That now this is the animals. These are the animals who wake you up. You understand? Screaming at their. They don't. The animals here like this is how they chip. In Africa, it's like it's like they are screaming out their lungs. So this is what you hear. Then suddenly it occurred to me. Oh, and then we have this bird which is called the hornbill. I don't know if you've heard it call. My God, you literally, it is amazing. So and then actually when people wake up, they are loud. So I wonder, the sun is loud. When the sun hits you, it's really hits you, right? When you step on the ground, you understand, you feel there's something weird, like there's a vibration. So that made me think that, is that the reason why there's a vibration literally on the continent that is very, really unexplainable. So, so that if you tune it, like, and I also find maybe so many Africans when they like travel to Western countries, this is how they struggle, because your vibration is completely different, right? From what you've known as a child, you understand? Or like your ancestors, this is how they communicate to the universe, right? And then suddenly you're in a place where you're like, shh, keep quiet, because it's so quiet, right? So those are some, I think, of the things that actually people, when you talk about integration, is you're talking about people integrating in cities. But people, we hear the universe, we listen to it differently. We hear it differently. So how do you put people in a city? You understand? Someone talked about India. And I'm like, my goodness, a city in India is like the bars there. You can literally run mad if you're not used to it. I've been to Nigeria and I literally got a panic attack at the airport before even you get into the city. Like everyone is just shouting. So you're just thinking, why is it? So how do you have these people in a city and live, harmoniously? And yes, to go back to now, this is for Dr. Hamilton. Like, how do you you asked a question about sorry, a question. Yeah, the different intelligences. Which intelligence is needed now, right? And my question is there one intelligence that, considering what I've just told you now and what I'm experiencing right now, I'm living in a world whereby nature here, like I've said in Canada, it's quiet, genuinely, because even when you go like on a river, in a river in Africa, it roars. Like a mountain is like, it speaks to you, like, there's something weird that I'm trying to literally come to, point and find, answers. But there's something very, very interesting there. So how do you, the fact that when people on the continent, they hear things differently. So that intelligence that guides them every single day is completely different from the intelligence that guides you you could be like, we're in Poland, you could be in, I don't know, in Hawaii. You understand? The people who live on the oceans, you understand, when they see water, they hear things which are completely different. And that's how I feel also Africa connects to us. When I go to a waterfall in Africa, it's like the magical experience. You just feel very grounded, like a human being who has, you understand, you feel alive, you understand? And you're very like confident, and because you just know nature is taking care of you, you're happy, you don't have to worry about things. Now, juxtapose it to the situation I'm in here. Like, of course, you're living in a city, you're enclosed the whole day, you're living in AC, air-conditioned, environment, completely cut off from the outside world most of the time, right? So anyway, yeah, those are my two observations, is that how do you then get all these multicultural cities, especially like Toronto, someone mentioned it. I go there and I'm like, okay, there's a problem here, there's a challenge here. How do you get all these human beings vibrating different frequencies to coexist in one space. So yeah, it was pretty much comments to both your presentations. Thank you.
Thank you. Paddy, do you want to go first?
That was a big question. I mean, how
Yes.
do you get a boardroom to vibrate at the same place? How do you get a team, a family to vibrate in the same in a similar way? I think there are a number of places, spaces to look at that, and we can start. I mean, for those, I call them the four domains and dimensions of our experience, where, you know, we cannot live without all four dancing together, because the interior has to be managed in terms of what we find as a trigger or a dissonance with something that isn't us, that is something else. How do we look for the beauty in the something else, in the othering, in the relational space, in the cultures? How do we appreciate the different cultures? How do we not see them as othering, but we see them as a contribution to the richness of the tapestry? If we're in the physical environment or a city, how are we looking at it? So there are processes of watching the behavior and the interior and the exterior of what are the judgments that we are making, and you know, are these part of everybody's experience, or are these specific to the cultural, the constructs that we have come from? What is creating the difference? But the tolerance of that difference is something to be worked with. It's that tolerance of looking for not the critique in it. And I think there's a whole lot in education that we have to change around how we see education, or how we are educated, and how we are thought of as what behaviors are acceptable. You know, the child who has this vibrancy is the same as a roaring waterfall. Can we allow a vibrant child to actually express itself, or do we take it down to say, no, be the calm stream? Whereas it's our capacity to manage that child, not really the child who is the problem. Yeah, so yeah, I think that's the question of our humaning, and that is the
Maybe
work we have.
maybe I
Can
could
I,
give a
before,
couple of different perspectives. Can I speak, or did you want to respond to
no,
Paddy?
just quickly mention to Dr. Paddy what I want is, I also feel what you've just mentioned is that how do you, someone's energy who is vibrating like a waterfall, right? How do you now put them in a classroom? You're talking about education, and teach them in four walls. You understand, for 8 hours. This child is going to struggle. This child is going to they won't know. They will not know at all. I have a friend of mine. She's German, but the kind of humor, and she's lived in Africa for like 25 years, right? Her humor is completely different. When she even talks about German humor, like they just don't, the things we find Africans like really funny, it takes them a very long time. They even get confused, like why, what is that, right? So here I am, you're both kids, you said you want us to teach us in the same way. I vibrate completely different. Maybe my children, I told you, were living on a countryside. And every morning they would just wake up to go roam the farm, climb trees. Because of course they were kids, so we're homeschooling them. But I feel like they were learning so much from the environment, because there's a natural connection of wisdom which just comes pretty much from the universe if you tune into it. Now, when you block yourself and constantly for 12 hours you're learning in one room, trust me, some people will break down completely, and in that system they'll become outlaws immediately.
Yes.
Without even knowing.
Maybe I could just say a few things, because I also, like Daryl, I'm going to have to go at the half hour. So you've raised some really interesting questions, Namali. Thank you so much. I would say that a lot of the situations you're describing, we could use an integral principle that one size does not fit all. And I don't know if you know, but there are 17 by some geographers' accounts, 17 different geographies in the world. And there are cities in every one of those geographies. And so that is the context in which people, whether they're cities or they're living outside of the cities, will grow up. I would say that those children expressing themselves like a waterfall, dancing, singing, so they're very close to beauty, truth, and goodness. And some of the people who are inspiring me these days say, Ian McGilchrist says that the reason that the world is in such a terrible state is that we've lost connection with our beauty, truth, and goodness. And when we see the children expressing like that, I'm saying they haven't lost that connection yet. And so that's really sacred dance. We even do sacred dance here in Ecovillage Findhorn. One other thing I would say that we've become very aware of here, if you came here, I think you would notice the energy of our land. You know, the earth herself is alive and has a beat, you know, that we can measure the beat of that Gaian heartbeat. But one of the ways that it connects through earth is through what we call ley lines. And the ley lines you have in Africa are not the same as the ley lines we have here. But we live at a place where these are like the meridians, if you know acupuncture, they're the meridians of the earth. They're ley lines that go through, and it's palpable. People who have never been through the entranceway to Ecovillage Findhorn, they will get like a few feet in and say, there's something different here. And they're right, because we actually have a convergence of 3 or 4 ley lines, not just one. And it makes a huge difference to the energy of the place. And this is when we put people in cities that, like you're talking about, especially children, it makes me weep to have them in 4 walls. And I think this is why now something like forest schools have now become much more popular. There's forest schools in London that take children out and they're not kept in classrooms. And I think there probably should be not just forest schools, but schools of the plains, schools of the seas, schools of the lakes, schools of the mountains, because wherever we are, there's a different geographical context, and we need to appreciate and love it, and know we have all this incredible diversity on Gaia, and by meeting those who are different from us, we get to appreciate that. So that's some of the things I would say. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marilyn.
Thank you, Marilyn.
Thank you so much, both Marilyn and Paddy, for sharing that. And Alice, you had me laughing. You're quite a bit, right? Because it explains so much about myself, what you were sharing there. Because Paddy would know that the moment I go to South Africa, I have to go to the mountain. I have to go to the sea, because even where I live in Scotland, I moved to the sea because I have to feel that vibration. I am that waterfall. I am that child that they stuck in a room. And I am the person that they said, you couldn't be a CEO. You have to be this, you have to be that. You know what I'm saying? And here I am, the CEO of both Global Mayors Academy and Living Cities Earth. So all I'm just trying to say is, I loved what Paddy had said, this appreciation of other, the appreciation of something that doesn't look like myself. Today, I was writing an article about diversity. The strength of humanity and us growing is in embracing our diversity. So it isn't about being loud, and it isn't about being soft. It is about being authentically, beautifully yourself and your frequency. And when Marilyn said, sorry, Anton?
Ferry, excuse me, before Marilyn will go, I would like to ask all participants switch on your mic and say thank you for Marilyn.
Okay.
Thank you, Marilyn, for joining us, and
Thank you,
hope to
Marilyn.
see you soon.
Yeah.
Thank you very much,
you.
Marilyn, for joining us and for your contribution.
Thank
Very
you.
much.
Thank you,
And
Thank you,
Marilyn.
everyone.
Carol, are
I
you also
enjoyed it very much. I look forward to
we're
come
all
back
here.
again.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank
the
you,
rest of
Thank
us
Marilyn.
you.
all staying here?
Goodbye now.
Yes.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Anton.
Thank you,
Blessings.
thank
And thank you,
you.
Paddy. Thank you, Feria.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So yes,
Yeah.
I was
Excuse
continuing
me,
to say
Ferry,
that.
please.
Yes.
You're
Sorry, Anton.
beautiful. So,
Thank you for reminding us that Marilyn was leaving. So she has another meeting to head to. But what I was saying was, it really is that. It is both what Paddy and Marilyn had said. It's so beautiful because also what Marilyn said is we want to cage things, right? And it's not even that we want to cage the loud things. We also want to challenge the soft things. We want to, if somebody is quieter, why aren't they louder? Why? That's who nature has made it. A flower is different to a lion. A lion roars and the flower just sits there and is beautiful. So the thing is, can we come into that appreciation of all that is? And all that is a reflection of ourselves. And so one of the things that really came through for me, and Paddy, as you shared about, how that maturity looks, how we interact with, firstly, where we are ourselves and where we are in relationship to others, on that kind of maturity you described. I would ask us to consider and think about, again, Marilyn's story of stewarding this new shape of what, Findhorn could become and what Findhorn is right now. And what stood up for me in particular was, as I know Marilyn very well, I know the kind of leader that she is, which is really inviting in a new kind of stewardship. She spoke about it, the carers, the curators and all of the others she spoke about. So how do you have that wisdom? How do you know how to lead like that? And Stephen, you talked about it, right? Because you were asking that question about how will we actually deal with what probably seems like a very complex system in South Africa, or even particularly where you might be finding yourself, as in how do we address and how do we bring what feels like a little dream that maybe Marilyn was sharing about, or maybe what Paddy talks about, this kind of maturity that we can be, working our way towards. And then also seeing that, the question that I asked was, Marilyn, you couldn't have done that if you were not that kind of leader. And it is this thing. So earlier in my own space as a leader, I remember, as I said, Alice was just calling out some things for me, and it didn't look like I could do certain things because I didn't fit a package that, certain, I guess, CEOs would fit, or certain ways of how the world would now see someone leading a city or a organization, etc., etc. You had to go through the specific kind of schooling, the specific kind of education that pushed you out on the other end to look a particular pattern, to look a particular shape, so that you could do that job really well. And that meant you were qualified to do it, right? Now, I'm not saying you are not qualified to do it. What I'm saying is life has this way of qualifying you through very different ways of becoming. And part of that is why we actually established the Global Mayors Academy, because again, we saw that there were leaders sitting in cities, stewarding different parts of the city, stewarding the NGO parts of the city, stewarding justice, education, all this kind of areas. And how do we bring that education that helps them become the leader that is the Marilyn, or is someone, is another person in an organization that truly understands how to steward and how to help the entire community mature. And so, so I'm just saying that, just to understand, what is this Global Mayors Academy about? In essence, it's about this. It's about nurturing the intelligences that allows you to become that kind of leader. And we need more of those leaders. We need more of those people who don't lord over, but help to steward. And it is this that Paddy has obviously spent 24, 26 years, Paddy, learning how do we nurture those kind of leaders. So I would like to invite John. Paddy, was your hand up first, or John? So
Just,
John, would
just to include John, who I saw his hand up.
And then Paddy will go after John.
Oh, no.
John.
Thank you very much. And I will have to run, and I want to be brief. And it's an honor. I just wanted to say it's an honor to get to talk with all of you, because it's obvious, it's absolutely evident that you're kind, caring, loving people who are serving in the world and understand so much about the essence of quality, loving, kind, caring, compassionate service. And you're modeling that, and you're walking that talk as obviously in all dimensions of your lives, and that's vitally necessary in this time, as far as I'm aware. And my name is John Jones. I'm CEO of World System Solutions Incorporated. We're a nonprofit that's striving to build collaborative support softwares that, in essence, can bring the catalytically and synergistically bring together people of your quality and your kindness and your care and high intentions into enough of an organized, synergistically organized and powerful enough capacity to shift the tide of the present dysfunctions of the world into resilience and regeneration, collaboration, sustainability, and reharmonization with the planet. Now, this is leading to a question, which I see as the crux of so many things. You folks are very, very connected with the energies and the love and the kindness that you're expressing verbally and through your choices and manner and relational dynamics, I've no doubt. Bringing that warm energy, that warm data into a space online that allows and supports collective, collaborative, organized, aligned, synchronized, synergistic action to be taken in a sustained way. In our understanding, with 4 years, if you believe science, that 4 years is now our window of opportunity to shift the tide. And if we can't organize based upon something, love is the obvious most important thing to organize around and for and to serve from, with absolute humility and high intention and care for others and the planet. That said, bringing that, enough of that, a critical mass, sorry for the poor metaphor there, of that love and kindness into a space where people, just like right now, is occurring amongst all of you, and thankfully me, bringing that love and kindness into enough concentration, enough obviousness, and enough deliverability to the world to say, there is a future, there is a possibility here for everyone. If you're willing to be vulnerable, if you're willing to love, if you're willing to care, and you're willing to share, and you're willing to serve, that message is a vital message. And that said, there's not a delivery system to the rest of the world that can help them resonate with that and support that constant signal going out to those people in need who don't have a way. They have not had the lives and the conditioning and the love and the kindness that you're all operating from and speaking from. And they don't know how to get there. And they need to get there within 4 years, and they need to get there together. And they need to be, horrible as it is, organized and technologized enough to change the misapplication of technology that has created the poly crisis and the climate crisis. So how do we get there together? That's my question. How do we generate that wave, that transformational wave of love and service and conscious intention and the realization of the Ubuntu understanding of I am because you are at scale and fast.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. And you're talking to something that, many have recognized. How do we do this at scale? How do we actually come together? And this is one initiative. There are many other initiatives, I'm sure, that are doing that, and we want to link up. This is not about we've got the way. It's about we have the will. And you said something very important there around the willingness. And part of the willingness is that this isn't easy work. This is difficult work. This might be loving work, but oh my gosh, does it ask of us to be really loving of ourselves and loving of the judgments that we make in very, very perverse decisions that are going on in the world. I mean, how can anybody shoot a child? How can anybody starve a child? How can anybody do that? And yet it is done. So how do we come to terms with our own shadow, recognize that whatever it is inside of us, given the right conditions, could be that turns into this perversity, but also it is absolutely based on the will, that to know that we can take a step forward or we can take a step back, and that the choice we make every moment of our day is an accountability. I call it compassionate accountability, because with compassion, it can't just be compassion in its soft and fuzzy form. It's an accountability state. It's like, you need to look at the systemic results of your choices that you're making and take accountability for that, not hide behind a we, not hide behind a system, not hide behind any kind of rationalization, but the accountability of looking down the line. And how do you hold people? You know, I have run the coaching center, and I haven't turned to coaching because I think coaching is the be all and end all. I worked with coaching as a vehicle of having the conversation for relationship. How do we have these conversations for relationship? How do we actually converse and communicate with an understanding that crosses our systems of misunderstanding? Because until you know what I mean, and we've actually engaged in that meaning making, we work in our different zones, believing that we're doing the right thing, believing that we're doing what we thought we'd got together to do. But we're actually doing something completely different. And it's the time, you know, taking the time to sit in the conversation, the time to slow down. Oh, and we're against, you know, it feels enormous, John. It feels like an enormous challenge. But what I do when I get into a room of like-minded people, not that you're all the same and not that we agree, but that we've got the will, that we turned up to say we have the will to get this together. And also to say, sorry, Ferial, I can unwind that. It was just more of the same. And I'd love to hear Nika, Marie, and anybody else who'd want to speak as well.
I just want to give a practical invitation also to John and to others here. So John, there are many folks also so apart from what Paddy just said, which is really important, and we believe that within the GMA, but then there's also very often when we're talking about this kind of development of the leader, people misunderstand that we're only interested in the inner development of a leader. We understand that then plays out into how we organize on the outside, how we organize our cities and our places where we live, our infrastructure, etc. So that said, there are groups within our community, both Living Cities Earth and the Global Mayors Academy, who deeply invest in the technologies that you are just talking about now. Paddy and I are part of teams looking at generative AI, looking at AIs that don't take the place of human, but you know, we're getting in there now to understand how do we develop that. We've got other, you know, the parts you talked about, how do you bring the community together to organize at unprecedented level now, you know, using technology. So my invitation to you, John, is if you're working on parts of these, because I think the invitation to all of us is actually come out of your silos, come work together, because together we're going to get there faster. We're going to need to Paddy was building a coaching thing and a whole organization, and here she is spending half of her time now working with us. So was Daryl. So is many of the other people that have been on the call, Marilyn, because we understand now we have to also work together. We do hold a part on our own, our expression, but that together is going to be the thing that makes all the difference now. So you're invited to the party, John. Come speak to any of us. If you feel more attracted to speak to Paddy, then please do, or me, or Daryl that was here in the call. Reach out. I'll put some numbers in the chat. And that's to everybody, not only to John, to everybody here. You're holding a part. I looked at your profile really quickly while we were sitting here, Joyce. That nursing part. Paddy has amazing work going on with working with medical practitioners, and how do we move that sphere into a different consciousness, and so on and so on. So whatever you're holding right now, reach out. I am pretty sure we've got someone in the community we can connect you with and expand that work. Right. Thank you.
And help you.
It's not about us, right? It's about building what you're doing, because building what you're doing helps building what we're doing. So we're always looking for the win-win. Anton, you had your hand up.
I think he was just doing this.
Did you want to oh, sorry, I thought you had your hand. I see Metabo. Great, Metabo. Please let us hear that beautiful voice.
Hi, and good afternoon or evening to everybody else. I know we're in different parts of the world. I just wanted to say this was a very beautiful conversation, and I was reminded about an interesting theme when you were talking about the music, Paddy. During COVID, I recall we had different musicians from different parts of the world coming together and recording a song, One Love, if you all recall that song. And as I was listening to different inputs and thoughts, and my input is that Global Mayor's work has the effect of bringing that kind of melody. You know, if some parts of the world are beautiful and quiet, if Africa is loud with its streams and things, I have never had a song which just moves on one bit. That's why Global Maze comes in, because if we can tap in the smoothness of Canada and fuse that with what's happening in the US, and then that comes down, the beat comes down to what's happening in Africa, that makes a beautiful melody. So that's the point I just wanted to say. When you look at the diversity within the Clovis Mayors, that's basically how we build one community in the world. That's exactly how we become together in the world, irrespective of our own individualistic approach. We bring that into the pot and we create a beautiful, colorful world, recognizing everything that everybody brings, their whole being. Because when you show up as yourself, there's nothing more beautiful. So thank you.
Nothing more beautiful. Thank you, Metabo, for that.
Gorgeous.
You are the frequency, you are the song, right? And it's beautiful. Thank you, Sister Metabo. Anyone else you want to contribute to this? We in the home stretch now, right? Here's your opportunity. Share something. What's inspired you today? What has prickled you? What has challenged you? What has said, hey, I want to rise into something here today? Is there anything like that for you? Joyce, I feel like you want to say something.
I did get chills when Paddy was speaking about accountability. And I feel like many of us do feel called right now to be finding others and collaborating and taking accountability. And I think that's part of the vibration that I felt coming off of your Global Mayor's copy. It's powerful. And yeah, I'm looking for collaborators and also feel like it was a beautiful call and there's so much wisdom in the room. So I'm grateful.
Awesome. So we're going to meet with you soon, right? Well, just to
Sure.
mention to some of you folks out there, in early July, I think it's going to be around it's not around, it is from the 11th to the 12th of July. We're going to be in Switzerland doing a leadership maturity training. If any of you are called to come out there and meet with us, we're also really going to meet with some collaborators there. And we're just getting going, you guys. So this is one of that to say, come on, here's our hands, just stretching it out. We're done with trying to build our own little thing. We're building together now. We're building for humanity now. Emmanuel, I didn't hear much from you. Do you want to add your voice there for a moment? You're invited.
Good evening, everybody. I know we are from different parts of the world, so I'm not sure whether to say morning, evening, or whatever. The whole conversation actually took me to my childhood on what a leader is. Is a leader from a position, is a leader a role? And from my African village, we all had roles to play. But the leader showed us how to lead in that role. And what comes to mind to me is for us to vibrate at the same frequency, we have to create a certain resonance of purpose to say, which direction do we want to go? And if we can create that resonance among ourselves, I think we'll get somewhere. And I'm totally into this community because I think there's a lot of wisdom, there's a lot we can share. And this is where I love what Paddy did with the integral diagram, because it's not only about I am because we are, and if I'm happy, are we all happy? But it's about what am I bringing to the table to make sure that that resonance happens and we are all kind of dancing freely to really bring ourselves out into the open and say, this is what I have to contribute, and see how that contribution actually builds to something better for everybody. That's my contribution.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing, Emmanuel. How deep resonance. Now, we have a few people in the room here that have not said anything for a while, not said anything at all. So we have Nika Marie and we have Sean Duval, who was all the way through listening. So if any of you still in the room and you'd like to unmute yourself, you don't have to be on the screen, but if you'd like to unmute yourself and add to the conversation, now's your moment to do so. So please do unmute yourself and add to the conversation. Also, Jerome, if you want to give any last thoughts, and then I'm going to bring us to a close. Again, anyone else, right, that has any last thought, because look, you don't know that one little gem that you might leave might literally just be what someone else needs to hear today. So we have some minutes, and then we're going to ask Paddy to just close for us with some last thoughts about the discussion today. Anyone wants to unmute and share, please do. Alrighty. I'm not hearing anybody. Anton.
Yeah, let me a few words. Just want to appreciate the conversation and engagement for our small group here today, but very warm. And I imagine how those principles which Marilyn today described from Findhorn are applicable for online gatherings and community like that. So which intelligence we need as a community, which intelligence and we need from the life by itself. So those are questions which I'm taking with me today, just to be with, and it's very inspiring because I know that our capacity is limited when we are looking for complex solutions for thriving of all of us, but we do it in kind of isolated way from the community. So the engagement is needed, and I'm excited how they in Findhorn for this decades growing those principles. And I see that their value system and also kind of rhythm of decision making and kind of practices, and only this works. So there is no magic solution. So it kind of engagement and co-creation of how we build it if it matter for us. Yeah, so thank you for this meeting today for everybody. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Anton, for those words. And if there's now no one else that wants to contribute, as I said, your last chance. If there's no one else, then Paddy, would you just
Sure.
share your last thoughts with us, please?
Thank you. And I see Dan has just come in. Welcome, Dan. And I'm sorry the timing might be out. I actually want, oh, John, do you want to
And
raise?
John, yes, before John's got his hands up, yeah.
I want to hear everything you have to say, Paddy, and I'm so sorry. And I just wanted to say, and this is our approach is to develop islands of coherence that evolve and collaborate and work together and collectively unite for the common cause, common good. The ability to hold that crucible of the island of coherence in a consistent, sustained way, and have the community own and live within that space and be the deciders of their futures together, and to be aware, far more aware of each other than they have been of late, with all the divisiveness of the world and misunderstandings. I just wanted to say that if we can create those spaces where people do understand and do connect, as you are all doing right now, your hearts are so beautifully connected. It's wonderful to get to be here amongst you, helping people hold that consistently, moment by moment, in their decision making, in every part of their work lives, their family lives, their social lives, and political lives. That resilience of love is, how can that be sustained? I would just want to ask, and thank you.
And you know, it was a question I asked a team. So I run a program of through Integral U, which is Integral Ubuntu, which is what we call our course for leaders and coaches. And it's a year-long program. And part of the sustainability of the program is that it is a year long, and because it is so intense, it is people intense. We really give great care. It does cost a lot to actually be engaged in with the accreditations and all the things that are the world, the kind of, it's not so costly from an overseas capacity, but from a South African capacity, it is costly. And because there's a 20-to-1 kind of exchange rate. So part of the question last night was breaking up the program into two, and I had resistance from the whole community to say that we can't, because and I know that in my heart, I know that it's why we have the long program, is that the work, the transformation happens if we get onto the mat regularly. We get onto the mat and we bring to that same mat, that same consistent, or the same holding, that same island again and again, and share how we are changing. That is the consistency and the reliability and the place of cohesion, because people want to leave just before midpoint. It's almost like if they get down to the bottom of the curve, it's like, I want to jump off this, and holding them in that space of anxiety and the space of making that leap into what true change is, just breaks through, and then there's a transformation, and the habit is then instilled and becomes part of you. So I did mention something about short courses, which are useful as tasters, but if we really want to do the work, that's where the will comes in, and the ability of our what we call developmenters holding our clients, who are all leaders in some field, holding them to the work. And the work is about managing the anxiety of holding the tensions, holding the polarities, holding the place where they want to get off and give up, because it's difficult to face yourself or face the world. So in that, I'd like to end with David White's words of his poem, where do we start? And I'm just going to read a part of it. Start with your own question. Give up on other people's questions. Don't let them smother something simple to find another's voice. Follow your own voice. Wait until that voice becomes a private ear listening to another. Start right now and take a small step you can call your own. Don't follow someone else's heroics. Be humble and focused. Start close in. Don't mistake that other for your own. Start close in. Don't take the second step or the third. Start with the first thing, close in, the step you don't want to take.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you
Paddy.
for being.
No much more to be said than that. Thank you for all of your attention. Thank you for the time that you have given to this conversation. We really appreciate it. And please stay tuned. We're going to have more of these conversations coming your way. And I want to end with only one thing. What is life asking of us now? What is it asking of you now? And remember, our hands, our hearts at the GMA, Living Cities Earth, we're reaching out and saying, come talk to us. So we didn't throw, I suppose we could just say if you, just an easy one would be any of our names, Ferial at Global Mayors Academy or globalmayors.academy or Paddy at globalmayors.academy. So any one of those, please just reach out and yeah, we can hop in a Zoom together and talk. Thank you.
Beautiful.
And we can
Thank
also
you.
find us in the chat WhatsApp. Yes, thank you very much, Paddy. Thank you, Ferial. Thank you, everybody, to join. If you want to switch on mic and say thank you, it will be very nice and warm.
Beautiful. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Okay, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye now.
Bye. Bye.
Cheers.
It was nice seeing you, John. Bye.
Thank you, Anton and Ferial and others
Thank
who
you.
are on here.
Thank you,
Lovely to see
Paddy.
you. We'll see you
Great
tomorrow.
meeting. Yeah.
We will. Boots and all.
Brilliant. Yes.